Madam Chair. It's take a call, but the amendment that I want to make is for the title. This bill is titled the Equal Pay Amendment Act. I want to suggest a different title for this bill because I don't think it accurately reflects what this is doing. And additionally, for a bit of a history lesson on equal pay, that means I think the Minister should consider perhaps a different title. So many different things have happened in relation to the history of equal pay in this country, and many of the different acts have specific names relating to the particular type of law that they were bringing in. So we had the Government Service Equal Pay Act that was in one of the first pieces of legislation that was in 1960, and that was appropriately named because that applied to only people in government service. Then the Equal Pay Act 1972 came in. That's the primary act, and that was the act which made it illegal, if you can believe it, for men and women to not be officially paid different wages, because those with long memories and have looked into this will remember that there was actually a time where it was legislated and it was in employment agreements that there were men's and women's rates for the same job. So that bill came in. Now, throughout that period of time after the passage of that bill, it was obviously good that it got rid of the men and women being paid different wages. But there was also something that actually had been the work of the suffragists in New Zealand after they obtained the vote. And they had wanted to focus on equal pay, had been one of their objectives. And that continued on after the 1972 Act. And in 1990, there was a new act, and the title of this act was the Employment Equity Amendment Act, and that was brought in 1990. And that bill was sought, as I understand it, to look at pay equity, but also look at other discrimination that was faced in the workplace. And so I think that was probably appropriately titled. Unfortunately, that act, brought in 1990, the pictures of Helen Clark receiving flowers in this very house after that was passed, that was repealed by the National Government that same year. So that bill, as we had it, is no longer on our statute books. Then we had a situation where there was a pay equity unit that was established. There wasn't legislative intervention. The pay equity unit was also disestablished by a national government. And then we had a case brought by Christine Bartlett, which was really important, very significant. That was in 2014, Madam Chair. And that case in 2014 was really a landmark case. I think everyone in this House respects greatly the work that Christine Bartlett did to bring that claim. She was Kiwi-Birb New Zealander of the Year, and it resulted in a law change. And it was actually, at that time, championed by a national government. And I had hoped, Madam Speaker, that was the change that we were to see, that we were all on one page when the national government agreed to Christine Bartlett's claim. Unfortunately, after that settlement was put in place, that settlement has now expired, and Christine Bartlett and her colleagues are now, due to this act, unable to take a pay equity claim. They're on the minimum wage, most care and support workers, until 2027. So there's a long history of equal pay, really, is my point, Madam Chair. It is appropriate that things are named appropriately, and so I think that this is another step backwards for equal pay in New Zealand. It's not unusual for this to happen, as you would see from the history. There's 2 steps forwards, one step back. We had been making progress. New Zealand had been going forward. We had been looking to settle claims. It's a hard process. I don't think that any of our comments about the process said that it's easy. It is difficult. It's a process that takes time. But people in good faith were going through that. This bill is reducing the ability to do that. Yes, it's not getting rid of pay equity entirely. I mean, that would be a retrograde step that I put past even this government. But this Act reduces the ability for women in New Zealand, underpaid women, to claim pay equity. And so therefore, I think the title is inappropriate. It's the same title as the last act that was passed that it says to repeal, the Equal Pay Amendment Act. It should have a different title, Madam Chair. I think it should be called the Equal Pay Reduction Act, because that is what it does. It reduces the ability for women to take equal pay claims. It makes it harder. It reduces the amount of money that they're likely to receive. It makes the group of people that can take those claims smaller. It reduces women's rights.
Honourable.
Great history lesson from Camilla.
Yeah, so how many of you guys know the difference between pay equity, equal pay, and pay parity?
Well, people think they're the same thing, but they're not.
They're not. They're actually quite different. So when Camilla Belich says equal pay, what she's talking about is same pay for doing the same work. When we're talking about pay equity, we're talking about people being paid for the same work, or for work, that requires similar levels of skills, experience, duties, and responsibility. And that brings up what a comparator is. A comparator is a person who is doing work that may be of similar value, but in a role that is mostly performed by men. So skills, demands, responsibilities are compared, along with working conditions and pay. So examples of this would be comparing a caregiver with a corrections officer, because very few women tend to work as a corrections officer. But when you can compare the two skills, right? Like Soraya was saying before, like with a caregiver, and I've been in a care home before and helped out with that stuff, you are dealing with people who are confused and can get quite aggressive due to dementia, and with a corrections officer, you are dealing with mental health cases, quite often people in prison. Here's another comparison: a cleaner and a labourer, right? Like you got a guy who works on a farm, like a farmhand, right? And then you've got like a full-time cleaner. Well, it's both skill that doesn't necessarily require qualifications to do, but it requires a very similar amount of input in terms of labour. So you're moving stuff, you're picking up heavy stuff, you're dealing with chemicals, you're dealing with, the cleaner is often dealing with members of the public, the farmhand isn't, but you're both dealing with, animals, humans being a type of animal, or you're dealing with cows. So yeah, you can compare those two. Or you can compare a nurse practitioner and a GP. Those two often do similar lines of work. So yeah, that's what we're talking about.
That's actually a good comparison to actually put it on there, because nurse practitioners have been a response to doctor shortages.
Yep.
Which is a response to, and it's a changing time. And actually, a nurse can probably as accurately do much roles of a GP, but doesn't have to quite go to the same training level as a GP. I'm not sure. I'll check this with Shine Muslim's wife, whether a nurse practitioner has to do additional things as I do know in the basic rounds of doctors, you have to learn as minor surgeries and all that sort of stuff, which obviously is something that if you have stitches and you need to be re-stitched up, I'm not sure if a nurse practitioner can actually do that job.
They can actually.
Oh, they can do stitches.
Yes, they can. And that's why I'm in favour of those two being paid exactly the same, because the day-to-day skill set that they have is pretty much the same.
Yeah, and considering, and most of the times the nurse practitioners are in GP practices as a way, one, it could be seen as saved as money, but also the other one is the fact that, there are people with qualifications who do get, have things there, that sort of stuff, and they pretty much, the basic stuff that comes into normal primary care.
But you can see how repealing this, repealing or pulling back pay equity would be very beneficial for the government, because it's we can replace doctors with nurse practitioners. We can just get them to do all the work and we can pay them less for it.
Yeah, which I think is a very slack way of doing it, because once you hit a certain point in there, sometimes the GP has to sit there and jump in. I can say one of the injuries I had in the past that led to needing plastic surgery, I don't think a nurse practitioner would have been able to sit there and do the job, because the nurse practitioner go, oh, heck, I'm in an unknown section here. I've got to go and talk to a doctor. Because the other rule around nurse practitioners is they've got to have a supervising doctor that can step in when there are situations where the nurse practitioner needs a second opinion or basically can't do the job, but whereas a doctor could step in. And I mean, in my particular case, it was, you can get stitches to stitch it back up. Yeah, sure. And starts going through the process and he goes, we've got worse news. I can't stitch it back up. You need surgery.
Yep.
On the tendon.
But another thing too that doctors tend to do a lot of is admin work.
Yeah.
So that which maybe a nurse practitioner is not quite doing the same amount as. But again, you've still got the comparison in skills.
Yeah. They can still find out, tell you if someone needs antibiotics.
And then you've got to wonder whether the admin work is actually necessary, because a lot of it is a whole pile of nonsense created by admins so that they have an employment job. Like ACC, I think when my GP left, he retired, I think he was doing 2 hours a day on ACC and another hour and a half for mental health referrals. And that's all stuff that it shouldn't be so hard to somebody, and to have to keep writing justifications for treatments that people need.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper